Today, we're going to break down a really powerful theory, one that helps explain one of the most confusing parts of modern life: why people believe what they believe, especially when it seems to just fly in the face of reality. I mean, you know that feeling, right? You're talking to a friend or a family member, or maybe you just see someone online and you suddenly realize you're not just disagreeing on facts anymore, you're operating in completely different worlds. It can be so frustrating. Well, there's a theory that gives us a new way to understand what's actually happening. It's called fantasy replacement. Now, when you hear fantasy, don't think about daydreams or fairy tales. In this theory, a fantasy is a powerful, emotionally gripping story that doesn't just, color our view of reality. It actually replaces it. It becomes the new blueprint for how we think and act. It's not a lens we look through. It's the very room we're living in. But here's the crucial part. Not all of these replacement realities come from the same place. The theory organizes them along what it calls the intentionality spectrum. And really, that's just a fancy way of asking a super simple but really powerful question. Who's the architect of this fantasy? To make this crystal clear, we're going to use one big analogy for this whole explainer. I want you to think of our beliefs like houses. Sometimes when we need shelter from a harsh reality, we build a house ourselves, from the ground up. Other times, we just buy a pre-built house that someone else designed and is selling. So let's start at one end of that spectrum, the fantasy we build entirely by ourselves. You can think of this like a secret treehouse, something deeply personal, maybe a little quirky, and really built just for one person. This treehouse fantasy is basically a private coping mechanism. When the real world feels too painful or confusing, a person constructs their very own story to make sense of it all. It's built from whatever ideas are just kind of lying around, and it's custom designed to soothe their specific fears and anxieties. It's a perfect fit for them. But because it's so personal, it can be a pretty lonely place to live. Okay, now let's jump all the way to the other end of the spectrum. If one end is a custom secret treehouse, the other end is like a massive cookie-cutter housing subdivision. These are the fantasies that are sold to us. This is what the theory calls an externally imposed fantasy. These are designed by outside forces. Think political campaigns, advertisers, mass media. They are professionally crafted, built with slick, appealing materials, and they are designed for mass consumption. And unlike that lonely treehouse, the subdivision offers an instant, ready-made community. Everybody on the block believes the same thing. So, okay, we have these two extremes, the totally do-it-yourself treehouse and the mass-produced subdivision home. But the theory's most important insight, the real game changer, comes from looking at that huge space in the middle. So what kind of house do most of us actually end up in? Well, the answer is the co-produced fantasy. This is the most common and, according to the theory, by far the most powerful type. The best way to think about it is like a customizable model home. The developer builds the frame, but then you get to pick the paint colors, the cabinets, the flooring. See, this whole process creates this incredibly powerful feedback loop. First, an outside source, a political movement, a social media influencer, a brand, offers up this compelling pre-packaged story. This story is expertly designed to tap into our deep psychological needs, our need for belonging, for certainty, for meaning. But then comes the crucial step. We're invited to personalize it. We add our own experiences, our own little tweaks, our own justifications. We make it ours. And that right there is the key. That mix of an external design with our own personal investment is what makes these co-produced fantasies so unbelievably strong. We don't feel like we just bought it off the shelf. We feel like we were a co-creator. We've got sweat equity in this belief system. This sense of co-ownership makes the fantasy incredibly durable. I mean, think about it. A purely self-made treehouse is pretty fragile. One strong gust of reality could knock it right over. And a purely store-bought subdivision, well, it can go bankrupt if the developer pulls out, right? If the propaganda machine stops running. But that model home we helped finish, the one where we picked the countertops and painted the walls, we are deeply invested. We will defend that house, that belief, with everything we've got. Because attacking it isn't just attacking an idea. It feels like an attack on our own choices, our own identity, and our own hard work. So why is this spectrum so important? Why does all this matter? Well, because it's not just some interesting academic theory. It's a practical tool for understanding the world, and maybe each other, just a little bit better. And this is absolutely critical. This framework isn't about winning an argument or labeling someone's beliefs as crazy. It is not a weapon. It's a lens. It lets us move past judging someone and get closer to understanding the function that a belief serves for them. It's really a tool that lets us see the architectural plans behind a belief. Is this a private treehouse someone built to cope with pain? Is it a subdivision home being offered by a powerful group? Or is it one of those co-produced model homes, held up by both an outside source and a person's deep inner needs? Just knowing the blueprint is the very first step to maybe, just maybe, having a more productive conversation. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to ask ourselves. Because let's be honest, we all build these houses to live in. So maybe it's worth taking a look at your own blueprints. The question isn't if you're living in a constructed reality, but what kind is it? And were you the only architect?